Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Whoa. What's happening, everybody? On this glorious Saturday, we're back live inside the lab. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. At least it is here where I am currently residing, and that is Maryland, here in the States on the East Coast, if you're not familiar. So tell me down in the down in the chat box where you're watching from, what's going on in your neck of the woods. How's your week going? And any questions you may have, please, anytime, feel free to drop them in this live stream. Just to do a little bit of house cleaning. We recently reached 2,000 subscribers, which is awesome. Thank you all for everybody who's subscribed to the channel. I feel as if I am growing at in terms of subscriber base. I am growing at a much faster pace than say my experience. I feel like I still have a lot to learn. Every day, I try my best to, read up on news and just some of the daily happenings here in the tech industry. That way, I could bring you guys informative and helpful and hopefully entertaining content that has you walking away feeling much better than you did before you press play. Say if you're having a bad day, or if you came into a video and you were looking for something specific, say the performance of a particular graphics card, or if you wanted to learn how to say increase the performance on your system with a memory overclock. And I haven't really done it. Excuse me, I haven't really done it a whole lot on the channel, but also um, CPU overclocking. So yeah, with that said, I am working on, fine tuning my craft with just getting better each day. Um, that way I can just bring helpful content here and bring something meaningful to the conversation and into the community. So yeah, shout out to all the subscribers who's joined inside the lab. Let me turn that down. Shout out to everybody who's joined or subscribed to the channel here, and we're still growing, ladies and gentlemen. We're still growing, um, and I am just grateful, beyond grateful, for everybody who is following along my journey. Again, I am growing. I'm trying my hardest to bring or deliver informative content, educational content, most importantly, entertaining content. Pleb YT says, "I'm back." Okay, I'm back. Yeah, welcome back. I know the timer. I like to just get things set up in the background, before I get the camera ready. But I keep telling myself, don't let it go the full 2 minutes. It doesn't need to go the full 2 minutes. But yeah, Pleb YT. It's good to see you here on the chat again. Um, Anybody else, if you're here in the chat or if you just joined in this YouTube live stream, we're going to configure a gaming PC that is under $500. It's competing very close to the upcoming new consoles, which I was having a conversation with a friend of mine off the platform. And I was telling him, I said the consoles are going to deliver, you know, it has the potential to deliver amazing performance for the value for what they're costing. Finally, I mean, consoles are finally getting things like fast SSDs and support for true 4K native support and things like that. They're becoming It's becoming harder to argue. Say I can build a PC that'll perform better than a console. I mean, it's true. This is a opinionated statement. Hopefully I won't get flamed too hard in the comments about it. But I mean, consoles have purpose, but PCs have character. The better experience is always going to be on a PC. Video games are developed on computers, right? And consoles are nothing but custom computers and custom boxes running custom OSs. But they do have a purpose. Pleb YT says, "What are your thoughts of the RTX 3080 and RTX 3090?" Well, I did a two part vlog for the upcoming month of Vlogtober, and if you haven't seen those, you can head down in the basement. And if you're watching on a replay, I'll try to remember to throw a link up to the card here so you can give those a watch. But I did do two vlogs on the RTX 3080, more so specifically, and I did the video based off the report from Igor's lab, which I will honestly admit that it was speculation on part of Igor's finding in his research. I just strongly agreed with him based off his findings and what some of the other reports were going on in the industry. Okay, yeah, see, yeah, you watched that, and I think the cards are phenomenal for their price. Like if you can get one at MSRP, I think they're a phenomenal buy, even with their issues. Like in that video, I got so much static from the community because I didn't want to make it seem like I was bashing the launch, or if you bought an RTX 3080, you should have buyer's remorse. I know I said, should you be worried? I mean, especially with computers, any first product launch you buy and there's issues being reported across the board, yes, you should be worried. But I did say that um, I was hoping that Nvidia would release a game ready driver that can help resolve most of the issues, and they sure did, and I'm glad. So the RTX 3080, if you can find one for its MSRP, I think they're fantastic cards, especially if you don't already have an RTX 20 series cards now, like I do. I know you said what are my specs, and to kind of segue into that, I have a Coffee Lake 8700K overclocked to 4900 megahertz, and the GPU I use, say for my live streams and encoding video and things of that nature, is an RTX 2080, but I do have other graphics cards. But the fastest graphics card I have in the lab is my EVGA RTX 2080 Ti. But I don't use it in my primary system. It's installed on the test bed, but I I think the RTX 3080, and more specifically the 3090, who I said in that video, I'm not quite exactly sure who the RTX 3090 is for, unless you're dealing with like high resolution graphic manipulation and 3D rendering. The 24 gigabytes surely may be something you could fully utilize, but for 4K gaming, 12 gigabytes, I mean 16 gigabytes is more than enough, and the RTX 3080 has 10 gigabytes of VRAM. So, I think they're going to be fantastic cards once stock stabilizes and we are able to find these cards for their prices for their MSRP prices that are being listed. Nvidia did go on to release a a press statement here recently that they're saying that they're going to push back the RTX 3070 launch so that there could be more graphics cards available for gamers at launch. And this is something I'm going to talk about in Monday's vlog. So if you're not subscribed to the channel yet and you're watching here live, or you're watching on the replay and you're not subscribed yet, I welcome you to subscribe to the channel. Hopefully this video or this live stream is the day I earn your subscription. But subscribe to the channel so you can catch that video out, because we're going to talk about the convenience of Nvidia changing their launch, the launch of the RTX 3070 to a day after AMD is set to announce RDNA 2, aka Big Navi. So um, I really think this is Nvidia's preemptive strike, if you will, trying to steal AMD's thunder. But we're gonna vlog about it on Monday. So be look out for that notification if you already subscribed. Pleb YT says that 3080 and 3090 for 3D marketing and graphic design, things like that. Yeah, I totally agree. If you're in that field and that industry, and even still, if you're in that field in that industry and you're like myself and you also still want to play video games, the RTX 3090 is still very much a capable gaming card as well. I'm all for convenience and your system having more than one purpose. Um, if especially if you don't, if you like myself, but and you don't, and you don't have multiple systems at your disposal. So yeah, I think they are. It is going to be for 3D marketing and graphic design, especially if like 8K and 16K photo manipulation and for video encoding, things like that. But I mean, the 3090 is just, it's a fantastic card. I know on the airwaves, most people are referring to it as the new Titan. And I said this in that RTX vlog, I believe. I still think Nvidia has left themselves room for an actual Titan, just like Nvidia has left themselves room still for a TI card, with the 3080 having 10 gigabytes of VRAM and the 3090 having 24. I mean, they can still squeeze at least a 3080 Ti, and there's rumors now of a 3060 Ti, which we're going to talk about a little later on down the live stream. But I really am interested to see what RDNA 2 does. And that's speaking from me as a person who has so many 20 series cards here in the lab, and also a few Pascal cards. So, and speaking of, if you are on a Pascal card, say if you do have a 1080, now would be probably a good time for you to upgrade as far as jumping from a 1080 or a 1070 to a 3080 or a 370 or a 3070. Getting that 2 extra gigabytes of VRAM is surely going to help you if you're ready to make the jump to a higher resolution from 1080p to say 1440p. Zfluent says, are you ever going to do a giveaway? Yes, I know this is something that we talked about previously on the live stream, and we are going to do a giveaway. I toyed with the idea of doing one at 2,000 subscribers, but it came so fast. So the next channel milestone, which is 50 videos, coming up on 50 videos. Don't quote me on that now. Unless somebody wants to do Lab is Solid and go check. But I think we're somewhere between 40 and 50. But that's the next big channel milestone. So I'm trying to make the giveaway significant and impactful, and a way to also celebrate the accomplishment of the channel. But keep an eye out for that 50th video. You'll know when it drops, and chances are, yes, we will do not, maybe one, or not just one, maybe a series of three giveaways to celebrate. But thank Zfluent, thanks for reminding me. Thanks for reminding me. Appreciate that. And I think Zfluent, I think I know who you are. I think I know who you are. So yeah, shout out to Z Fluent in the chat. Play YT. I know, dude. You still got that 710, man. That thing's holding up. That thing's holding up. We talked about that on the first live stream, which is which is funny because when I first had the pleasure of talking to you, it was on a similar live stream, and that is when we did the $600 gaming PC. And this one's not going to be as high or as similar, with there being one big difference. And you said I have used, okay, 44 videos. Dang. I know 44, it doesn't seem like as much. And among like my just content creation journey and just learning from different people and different other just other different YouTubers in the industry, just they tell you really try to focus on your first 100 videos. Pleb says I have 135 videos, 249 subscribers. I know everyone's journey is real different. It really depends, in my opinion, how you start within those first 135 videos. I I mean, that's a lot of videos. That's nothing to fret over. Most people can't make it past, is it 10? I don't know the exact I don't know the exact percentage, but most creators can't make it past 10 videos or 5 videos before they quit. So keep going, Pleb YT. I'll check out your channel after the live stream to see what kind of content you make. But just keep at it. I I toyed with the idea of sharing some of the things that have worked for me as a creator, although that isn't the purpose of this channel. But on just like some of our one of these days, I'm gonna do a pop up. I'm gonna do a pop up community live stream, just unscheduled, just pop up and just chat, and maybe in that environment or in that ambience, I'll share some of the things that has worked for me as a creator. But everyone's journey is really different. Pleb YT, if you aren't familiar with TubeBuddy, this isn't they're not sponsoring the stream. They're not sponsoring the stream. Hopefully though, if they're watching on the replay, maybe they'll consider sending me an email. But if you're familiar with TubeBuddy, or if you're not familiar with TubeBuddy, it's a browser extension that can help you, improve areas in your channel. That way you can help you grow and maximize your reach here on YouTube. I have a link, an affiliate link down in the basement you can check out after this live stream. It's free to download. It's absolutely free. There's no cost obligation, but if you want to level up your subscription model, you can, and you get more features, but it is helpful, especially with trying to increase visibility, which I don't want to go too far into like channel growth, but in my opinion, visibility is one of the most important ways you can grow here on YouTube. Any like, subscribe, or view always starts with getting your thumbnail in front of a human being. So check out TubeBuddy down in the description below, Pleb YT. Again, it is affiliate link, but if you sign up, it's free. I don't get anything. It just shows TubeBuddy that our community is growing, and it's an awesome product. So, but let's jump into this training session here really fast. And I say really fast because normally our live streams have gone over about an hour. I'm not going to try to keep you guys and take up your Saturday for that long. But with so much going on in the tech industry, and I know there's other larger, much larger, and even arguably better tech YouTubers than myself that would say now's not a good time to build a PC. Unpopular opinion. I think the time is always dependent on you. If you have the money in hand, money in the bank right now in your wallet, and you have everything else you need, we talked about this on last week live stream, which you can, if you're interested in hour-long sessions of me talking, you can check the playlist down in the description. And if you're here on a live play, I'll try to remember to throw the link up or the card up to the playlist so you can check that out. But we talked about this in last weekend's live stream where you want to make sure you get everything in place before you start building, but it always starts with this process here, and that's configuring your parts or knowing the parts you want to buy, right? So jumping over here to our browser, and we're gonna start a new list, right? We're gonna start a new list. Starting off at 0 watts. Play by T says I do live streams. I do Fortnite, Among Us, and Warzone. Also, I use Opera GX for my browser, but I'll check it out. Okay, yeah. They also have an app. It's not as robust as the desktop, and I am not 100% sure. So I don't want to give you false information or the wrong information. I'm not 100% sure if it's compatible for Opera GX, but it is certainly to certainly to look out for or look at after you go live. Okay. Yeah. I mean, thanks for joining in early. I do appreciate it. Best of luck on your live, and I'll check your content out. All right. Cool. So yeah, jumping in, getting a system. It starts here. It starts with knowing your needs, right? Um, knowing your resolution, knowing your refresh rate, knowing the type of games you play, right? Before Pleb left, or if he's still here, like I said, he plays Fortnite, Call of Duty Warzone, and Among Us. I haven't really touched Among Us too much, but I have heard and seen a lot of good things about it. But I've played a good. I mean, it suffices to say I've played enough Fortnite, and Warzone. And let's say we want to build a system that can play those games, and we want to stay under $500. Like you saved up 2 months, 2 months, 2.5 months. Let's say that's a long time. Let's say 2 months. You saved up 2 months, about $500, $450, $460, and you want to build a gaming system. Excuse me. You don't want to build. I mean, you don't want to wait for a console. Maybe you already have a console. You're tired of potato graphics and potato refresh rates. And again, nothing wrong with consoles. Consoles have a purpose, right? For those who just want plug and play, and there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. So when you're picking out your system, I highly suggest and I highly recommend you start with the CPU, right? You want to start with the CPU because that's going to be indicative of what you want to get out of your system. In this case, we're building a system that's not going to be intended for gaming and streaming. We're building a system that's not the best for video encoding. It can do those things. It just, not at you just can't you won't have it won't be the best viewing experience for your audience, but you can stream on it. But we're going to talk about that later down in this live stream because there are going to be future changes you can make to the system that are going to be affordable and that's going to help improve your expectations. And say if you do want to level up your if you do want to level up your computer and start creating content, and say you do want to start streaming to Twitch or you want to make some YouTube videos, you will be able to do that on this platform. One of the biggest things I advocate for and I appreciate with Ryzen and AM4 is the wide range of upgrade options you have with going with any one of AMD's current AM4 chips or AM4 on the AM4 socket, and their wide range of chipsets from B450 to B550, X370, and 470, which you likely will find some of those former motherboards, the X370 and things like that, and B450s on the used market, which is good because if it's coming from a private builder, chances are they've already updated the microcode and the motherboard is Zen 2, Zen Plus, and Zen 2 or Zen 3 ready, or Ryzen 5000. And that's something else we're going to talk about too here down the live stream is the Ryzen 4000/5000 series. And I say that because I read an interesting article that shows that AMD could unify the naming scheme or still keep them separate from the APUs. So, which speaking of APUs, and hint, how else would we how else would we build a system under $500 that can play games competently? Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going with an APU, a CPU that has onboard graphics. And for that, we're going to start with the AMD Ryzen 5 3400G, right? Has simultaneously multi-threading, so that's AMD's version of hyper-threading, which hyper-threading is Intel's version. So it has 4 cores and 8 threads. That's going to help for gaming. That's going to be good for gaming. Some games, depending on what you're playing, CS:GO, GTA 5, they do take advantage of the extra threads. So it's only going to help you with your, like, say, minimums and your 1% lows. But this CPU surprisingly is it's like has 2 less cores and 2 less threads than a Ryzen 5 3600. Like that's it. That's one of the biggest difference. The trade-off that you're getting with going with the lower core count, right? But it has onboard Radeon Vega 11 graphics. So again, the CPU is an APU. We won't need a graphics card. That's the key to um to building a system, or hitting that affordability mark that we're targeting in that $500 mark, because it's so popular. It's just for some reason I see it in not message. I see it in forums and common threads, on other tech channels, videos, and things of that nature. But um, it's a popular price point. But it's unless you're surfing the used market, maybe not a good term to use, but unless you're browsing the used market, building a new gaming PC with a dedicated GPU, it's doable, but very, very tight, as we'll demonstrate here today. So, yeah, the Ryzen 5 3400G has onboard graphics. It is an APU, Vega 11 graphics, very capable, a very capable APU. big upgrade from the previous series APUs, and it is a Zen Plus CPU. Again, not to confuse with say the 3000 series, which is Zen 2. AMD decided to use the 3000 naming scheme for their APUs, which is why uh, we're calling the we're calling Ryzen 4000/5000 because we're not sure if it's going to be say Ryzen 5 4700 and they just keep it to 4000 series and then they just keep the APUs at 4000 series, or will it be like a Ryzen 5 5600 and the APUs will keep the 4000 series naming scheme? Hopefully AMD will unify it because they've been doing well with not confusing the market with convoluted naming schemes and what have you. But the Ryzen 3400, great CPU, and again comes with the CPU cooler. We don't have to buy an aftermarket CPU cooler unless you absolutely positively want to. But the Wraith and Wraith Max, I believe, or I believe it comes with the Wraith Stealth, they're capable CPUs, especially I mean, you don't want to do any manual overclocking on them. At least I wouldn't recommend it, simply because of the extra heat being added once you start bumping up the voltage to compensate. It's better to just let it turbo because from my findings, the 3400G can turbo up to 4 gigahertz, 4.1 gigahertz all on its own, without touching any of the settings. So that's more than enough for everyday just casual use of your system. If you're a student, or if you're doing virtual learning right now, or if you have young children that are doing virtual learning, just hook a camera up, and this system here that we're going to build will be able to be both a tool, a productivity tool, and also a entertainment tool for gaming and streaming. So yeah, we're going with the Ryzen 5 3400. Has a very low TDP, 6500 or 60. You imagine a CPU with 60? No, that's just unlikely. But has a TDP 65 watts, so very low TDP. And yes, that does mean that we wouldn't have to say go with a beefy power supply unit, but we are going to want to leave a little bit of headroom for upgrades. So that is something we're going to talk about down in the live stream. So yeah, Ryzen 5 3400, we've added it. It's in our cart. Again, and one thing I love about PcPartPicker is that it starts calculating your estimated wattage for just, I don't know if that's idle usage. I don't want to say that's idle usage, but most likely that's not max, like with the system under max load, like under a max GPU load or a max CPU load. So, but it's going to help us stay within the correct range for our power supply. So we have our CPU. Let me jump back here, address the audience. So we have our CPU, the Ryzen 5 3400G. Okay, it's 4 cores, 8 threads. It's on the Zen Plus architecture, so it's a Ryzen 3000. It's technically in the 2000 to 3000 series family range because Zen Plus was, say, like for example, the Ryzen 2700X and 2600. Fabulous CPU. When I'm talking to you, lovely gentlemen and ladies, on the common threads and in the comment sections, almost all the time, I'm seeing when I ask for configurations and specs, Ryzen 5 2600, Ryzen 5 3600, it's a great CPU it's a great 6 core CPU for the money. And I'm seeing them on the used market come down between 110 to 120. So if you're here on the live stream or if you're here on the replay and you're curious as to performance value of a Ryzen 5 2600, let me know. I'll do my best to get one here in the lab, and we'll try to run some tests on, say, a B450 motherboard or even an X370 motherboard to see how well they've aged. Because you can get an X370 motherboard, make sure the microcodes or the BIOS is updated, and say slap a Zen 2 or a Zen Plus or even a Zen 3 CPU inside. So let's jump back over to our training scene, because the next most important part we have to choose, that's our motherboard, right? That's our motherboard. I mean, once you have your CPU, I mean, in your mind, you already want to know the platform you're going with. In our case, we knew we were going with Ryzen, right? So we knew we were going to choose an AM4 motherboard. It just depending on our budget is dependent on the chipset we go with, and the chipset again is say B450, in this case, PC Part Picker went with compatible products. They listed motherboards that are compatible with our CPU, and they did that. But in essence, all Ryzen CPUs are compatible. Okay, but you have to make sure that the BIOS is updated to support that CPU architecture. QVW, sorry, says, can you do a ITX form factor build under $500? That's an interesting question. Do you mean like configured here on the live stream or on the channel? QV. I will say that I have an ITX form factor case down here. It's the Lian Li Dynamic Spec. I want to say 11. Don't quote me on that, but it is an ITX small form factor case, but the price wouldn't be under $500 based off what I would want to put into it. But we can do a physical build here and show you how to put it together. That's something I did want to do for a future live stream. I thought that'd be pretty fun to do a live build with you guys and girls. But this build here is similar to a small an ITX form factor. It's just that we're not going with an ITX motherboard. Um, Most likely micro ATX for this build. And for which platform? For Ryzen QVW? Let us know in the chat. But I mean, interesting question. But this build is very similar to it, and we'll talk about some of the performance expectations a little down the road on the live stream. Yeah, it says QVW says I love to see it. Absolutely, it's a build that I've been planning behind the scenes, and it's one I'm really looking forward to doing because I've I've never done an ITX build before, and what's delaying. I will say this on a live stream, a little bit of behind the scenes um, a little bit behind the scenes information. What's holding that build up is the availability of SF power supply units. They're out of stock everywhere online, and here locally, they're like nigh impossible to find. I have been trying to get my hands on one. If I bought one used, I'd be paying 2 to 3 times more off, because scalpers are everywhere on eBay, believe it or not, still. But that's really what's holding up that build is I need an SF power supply unit, and they're just sold out online, or I can't get a decent one that I'm comfortable with. So yeah, so be on the lookout for that QVW. But interesting question. Hopefully this $500 build is close enough to an ITX form factor. Again, we're going with micro ATX, and originally I had in mind with going with the DS3H, the Gigabyte, the Gigabyte B550 motherboard. But if you don't want to, if you don't want to upgrade the BIOS, and either you're not comfortable with it or you just want to get your system, build it, and just play, then my recommendation is go with the motherboard that supports the socket already from the jump. And this is why PC Part Picker is a tool I highly recommend, because they'll already list the compatible motherboards that'll save you the headache of researching, say, will my CPU will the microcode support this CPU and what have you. PC Part Picker does most of the legwork for you. Excuse me. KVW says, I am currently moving to Germany, so I really am planning on building one. Wow, that's awesome. I'm interested. Are you in the service, QVW? Let us know. Yeah, I mean, if I had to move, dude, I definitely want to take my PC with me, or build one to go. And from my understanding, parts are so much more expensive over there in Europe. It is probably best for you to build now here on the States, and just pack it up and bring it along with you before you get there. But yeah, try if you have any questions about the build, you KBW, you can always reach me more direct over on YouTube or YouTube. Yeah, you can reach me on YouTube too, but you can reach me over on Twitter, right? If also anybody else watching, I'm usually always available on Twitter at Inside the Lab YT. So if you want to talk about more of your build questions, or if I can help you get started, you can always reach out to me over there. Okay. And send, at me, and I'll send you a DM. But going with the motherboard that already supports the microcode is very important. It says moving for colleges. Okay, all right, that's awesome. Best of luck to you with your studies. All right, higher education is so important in today's field. But going with a motherboard that supports your CPU is very, very important. I've done a build with this Gigabyte B450 DS3H. I had no. Oh, wait. Okay, hold on. Not this. Not the D3H B450. Okay, where is our B550? Okay, let's do this. Let's back change the. Let's go B4. Let's go X470. Let's see what X470 motherboards we have. And how do you go moving for college? Is that where do you go now? What college are you currently enrolled to? See if we can find. Tell us if this. All right, so let's go with the MSI X470 Gaming Max ATX 8 and 4 motherboard. I couldn't get it out, but I'm a huge fan of MSI's aesthetics, especially if you're not a fan of RGB, right? If you are a monochromatic fan and you like that gunmetal, black, silverish kind of gray uh, look, and you want a motherboard that's has capable VRMs, good power delivery, supports for M.2, has good memories. I'm gonna go ahead and say it has good memory support. Yes, look at that. Although our CPU, okay, just finished high school. Well, congratulations then. I had my son too. Okay, I'm sorry to assume you say I'm not from USA. All right, my bad for assuming you are. My son too just graduated from high school. Tell us where you're from, QVW. Tell us where you're from. Our CPU has a max rated speed of up to 3200 megahertz, but it is good that our motherboard has support for up to 4000, 4133. So this is good because um, while Asus has announced that they're going to refresh their B450 line of motherboards to have things like better or larger firmware for more microcode, um, higher memory support, allegedly for up to 44,000, which is a lot for a B450 motherboard, but up to 4400, 44,000. Jeez, that's like four point. I don't know. It's a lot of commas. It's a lot of zeros. But what I meant was 4400 megahertz versus their old motherboards, which is somewhere between 32 or 3600 megahertz, I believe, about 3600 megahertz. But this is good because although we're likely going to go with a memory kit now of let's say 3200, if you wanted to upgrade down the road to faster RAM when you upgrade your CPU, you have you have that option. You have that option of doing so, right? But one of the things I like most about the going with an ATX motherboard is support for M.2s, NVMe M.2s, so you get faster read and writes. USB 3.2 Gen 1 headers, that's important too, because we're gonna talk about that when we pick out a case. But I mean, this motherboard, 64 gigabytes of RAM memory, max is the max supported memory. Would you need that much? I say if you're in the RTX 3090 range, what we talked about earlier in this live stream, and you're doing high resolution rendering or high resolution graphic manipulation, if you're streaming, 32 gigabytes is a must in my opinion, in my understanding. If you're streaming games, but it has a memory max of 64 gigabytes of RAM. So I don't want to say you'll be future proof, but you'll have a lot of headroom down the road, and that puts us so far at about let me find our at 249. Um, we're not even halfway to that $500 mark, and we got so far two of the most important pieces to this system. Q QVWU. I'm gonna call you Q. Q says they're staying in Turkey. Awesome. Okay. Sorry if my English is a bit crude. It's not my first language. It's all right, dude. It's my first language, and I've been told my English is crude too. So it is what it is. I understand you loud and clear, though. I understand you loud and clear. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. And speaking of, if you are just currently joining us on this live stream, we are configuring a Zen 3 ready, $500 under $500 gaming PC. We've already chosen the CPU and the motherboard. So we're going with a Ryzen 5 3400G. 3400G, G is in gangsta. It has 4 cores and 8 threads, SMT, and a boost 3.7 gigahertz base and a boost of up to 4.2 gigahertz. For our motherboard, we're going with the X470 chipset. And I do want to note that you this is going a little bit further down in the live stream, right? And let me address you. This is going a little bit down the live stream. Asus is refreshing their B450 line of motherboards. I I expect them to cost somewhere between a range of about $129 to $160. They don't want to go into the B550 range because then they're going to cannibalize their B550 motherboards. So you have choices, but if you want things like PCIe 4.0, then you will have to go with the newer chipset like an X570 or an X470. But I highly suggest, and it's in my opinion, that I recommend you shop for a motherboard if you're an inexperienced builder or if you're just getting started. You shop for a motherboard that is going to be compatible with your CPU. If you're not in the market for a Zen 2 or a Zen, let's say you're in the market for a Zen 2 CPU, and you're obviously not going to want to shop for a B450 motherboard. Chances are you'll be in the X570 range, at least the X470 range. But in this case, we're going with a Ryzen 5 3400G, so you really don't need to go with a high-end motherboard, in my honest opinion. But you could potentially wait for these newer motherboards to launch. They're coming at the end of October, right along lines of AMD's Zen 3 announcement on October 8th. So, yeah, I mean they lined that up perfectly, right? They just positioned themselves to say, you know what? These new CPUs are coming. We want better support of microcode, uh, better memory support for these CPUs. So you could hold out, you could wait. That is certainly an option you have. But if you want to build to play now and upgrade later, this system's for you. This system could be for you, right? So let's jump back. I'm sorry. I guess you guys got to see it. And if you haven't yet, be sure to give the live stream a like. And if you haven't yet, I welcome you to subscribe to the channel. It does help me grow here, both on the platform and as a creator. We are experiencing a subscriber boom, and I'm just so excited to meet and talk to all the different members in this audience, whether it's constructive criticism or destructive criticism. I welcome it all. QVW says, I have seen people overclock up to 4 gigahertz and 1.375 volts with that. I can believe it. Yeah. I mean, I can believe it. Um, especially with the Zen Plus architecture being more refined from Zen. Didn't really require as much voltage to get up to 4 gigahertz. I had a Ryzen 5 1600X that you might have spotted in the Wonder Woman video we did in my early years here. And fun fact on that video, I recorded that video without the microphone on the camera. So forewarning, if you go back and watch it, it is nothing like the current content. It just really isn't. But that it was a Ryzen 5 1600X that can do 4 gigahertz, um, without any problems under 1.4 voltage. So, and that was a 6-core 12-thread CPU. But yeah, this CPU you can manual overclock. It'll probably even pass 4 gigahertz if you want to install like a 120 millimeter AIO or a 140 millimeter AIO to put in the rear of the case. You could even maybe overclock it a little further if you wanted to squeeze out just a little bit more performance. But yeah, I mean, good stuff. Thanks for sharing, Q. Let's jump back into our list. So doing a quick recap. We have a Ryzen 5 3400G, 3.7 gigahertz quad core processor, We're going with the MSI X470 Gaming Plus. It is an older chipset by one generation because right now X570 is rocking the market. Not really, but I mean PCIe 4.0. If that's what you want, then you have that option. I love one of the things I love about just building computers and just but just PC gaming is that you have a wide range of choices in terms of aesthetics and performance, right? And versus how much you can and want to spend. If you have $600, then you have $600 to spend to create the best possible gaming experience. If you have $1,200, then you just have a higher chance of leveling up your gaming experience. But that's one of the things I love is the interchangeability of parts, ability to pick and choose what you want to go inside of a system based on how much you can spend. And for us today, that's $500 for us today. So again, two of our most important parts, and we're up 249. 249.98. This is full disclaimer. This is in USD. And from some of my European friends and friends just from all over the world, they have shared with me that unfortunately some of their parts are really expensive in their neck of the woods, and I'm sorry for that. I know my sorries don't go far, but that just really sucks, and I just hate the fact that everybody can't enjoy this awesome hobby, and we're all paying fair prices. It just really sucks. And I always try to recommend, how's the used market in your area? Can you maybe mitigate some of that cost? Buy parts new that may have a high chance of failing. Say, not memory, buy your motherboard new. Try to buy your, a motherboard CPU new. Try to buy RAM secondhand or GPU secondhand. Pick up a secondhand case if you can. Just any way you can kind of mitigate the extra cost for those parts so you can build a similar system or a lot of the systems I talk about here on the channel. So we have our Ryzen 5 3400G. We have our MSI X470 Gaming Plus. The next important part we need to go with is your memory. Now, we talk about it here a lot on the channel. You want to get a RAM kit that's compatible with your motherboard's QVL, and that's a simple Google search depending on your chipset you're going with. And you doing that gives you the best chance of getting RAM that's going to be best optimized for your motherboard. And that way you won't have to do a lot of manual tuning to say enable your extreme memory profile, or as somebody corrected me recently on the channel, if you want to call it a DOCP, they're essentially the same thing. But get if you get a memory kit that is best optimized for your motherboard, you just have a greater chance of meeting your targeted rated speed, or even overclocking it too if you want to do manual overclocking, which I don't really recommend unless if you're going for a world record of some kind. Not a world record, just a record in general. You're just casually overclocking. At that point, you're not watching videos on how to enable an XMP. But for the casual gamer who just wants to make sure, or what I say is you want to make sure the XMP is enabled first and foremost when you build a Ryzen system. Go into the BIOS, you can get into your BIOS by hitting delete really fast after startup. So right before the boot logo flat appears, or while it's appearing, you can hit the delete, jump into your BIOS. Just make sure the memory is not at 2133. I really think my audience, or maybe I didn't convey that enough in that video, but really, I just wanted to show you why you wouldn't want your memory to be at 2133 megahertz. That is DDR4, I'm sorry, DDR4 default memory speed, and it just really chokes the integrated memory controller on the Ryzen CPUs. So if anything, a good target, in my opinion, is 2666 megahertz. Um, in that video, and if you haven't seen it, I'll try to throw a link up to that card here on the replay, but you can also find it down in the basement. That's the description box. But in that video, I talked about this, and I showed the performance gains you can expect if you don't run your memory at 2133 megahertz. If you say go from 2133 megahertz to 2666 megahertz, it was like a 10 to 15% bump in FPS in our games, or the games I tested. And yeah, it is difficult to like replicate the like the exchange the that you can um, replicate the exact same movements or actions in a game, but they are the say the position from A to B is the same. So QVWU says, I think enabling XMP can violate warranty, or at least it's like that in major Turkish retailers. Well, what I recommend is it's always good to check with your manufacturer's warranty because they are different for for each manufacturer. They're not all the same. Um, I honestly, I again don't want to spread misinformation, and I'm not sure if it does or if it doesn't. But you know, unless you kill your RAM, it's really not going to have any adverse effects, in my opinion. And I've been enabling XMP on all the systems I've built for clients locally, and I have not had one complaint about their memory having any instability issues. Wow, I can't talk this Saturdays because it's so nice outside. But yeah, it's always good to check any kind of overclocking. That's your GPU, your CPU, your memory. Always check your manufacturer's warranty and the fine print on what you are allowed and aren't allowed to do. To some people, they really don't care. Like if I burn memory, if I kill memory overclocking it, like, and I would imagine that's trying to input some ridiculous amount of voltage. It's normally where it would start with anything overclocking. CPU too. Um, it's just if I kind of just try to run some type of insane volts, anything past 1.55 volts or something like that. At that point, I know what I'm doing. I know I'm running the memory past spec, but that's just one of the risks to overclocking. So, but again, that's why I recommend you try to pick a memory kit that is already on your motherboard's QVL, that's quality vendor list. And if you wasn't going with the MSI, if you was going with an Asus Prime B450 motherboard, go to Google, type in Asus Prime B450 motherboard QVL, try to select a 2x memory kit that's on your motherboard's list. So with this system, okay, which is commonly G-Skill. G-Skill, their Ripjaws V series, they're almost on most B450 motherboards, QVL. You want to stay for 16 gigabytes. RAM has come down in price significantly. I believe it was 8 months ago. Don't quote me on this. I believe it was 8 months ago, 9 months ago. RAM was at an all-time high, just super expensive. It was bad. Like it was bad. I had a 32 gigabyte Corsair RAM that I paid 279 for, I believe, in a couple years ago, and when the memory crisis hit, it was worth up to like 500 bucks. Like there were scalpers left and right selling their RAM way more for what it was worth on eBay. And again, I refused to sell just because I could make extra money, simply because I know that there would have been a serious chance that if I did sell it at a price that was everybody else wasn't selling, just a scalper would have just bought it from me and turned around and sold it to make a profit. So I just held on to it. But back to the memory for this system, we're going to go with the G Skills Ripjaw V Series 16 gigabyte kit, $62. 3200 memory, 3200 megahertz. That's a good speed. Ryzen gets funny, at least on the Zen. I can confirm on Zen. I haven't really played with a lot of Zen Plus CPUs, but Ryzen gets funny with 3000 megahertz RAM. So you really want to target either 29, 33 megahertz, or if you're able to get a successful post at 3200 megahertz, depending on your motherboard and CPU, and that's what your memory's rated speed is, go for it. But if I were to build this system in person and I installed the CPU and the motherboard, installed the RAM and everything else, which we're going to get to here in a minute, I would instantly go into the BIOS and set the XMP to 3200 megahertz. Why? Well, for starters, the CPU. See if I can find it. It's not here. Okay. Well, it's not here, but I know the 3400G supports up to 3200 megahertz RAM. Okay. And our motherboard, while supports way past that, it's all about what the memory support or the CPU. That's important. And we're already at that targeted 3200 megahertz. So if this CPU kit is on this motherboard's QVL, enabling the 3200 megahertz XMP, shouldn't be an issue. You should not have to touch the timings, the voltage, maybe change from auto, or normally they're at 1.2 voltage, 1.35, 1.45. While it is past specs, and if it's something you're uncomfortable with doing, then consult with your manufacturer's manual. But enabling a 3200 megahertz XMP shouldn't be an issue, right? And that's going to help you. That's going to help with your minimums of 1% lows, CP, just an overall quality experience on your system. Anything low, anything better than 2133 megahertz. Even if you couldn't post, say you couldn't post at 3200 megahertz, I would try 29 3300 megahertz. And if you still couldn't get a post, if you're getting a black screen, I would then go back into the BIOS and try 2666 megahertz. It really is a comfortable spot for Ryzen, in my opinion, just from my experience with Ryzen. It's a good place to be, and you are leaving some performance on the table if you aren't going with fast memory and at best memory rated for your CPU, max rated for your CPU. So, I mean, and it's important to note that this is something that, let me address you guys and girls. It's important to note that this is something AMD is hoping to improve, improve on even more from Zen 2 on forward to Zen 3, and its better memory support. We see this because also with Asus's relaunch or refresh of B450 motherboards, one of their biggest caveats or biggest highlights with this refresh is better memory support, higher memory overclock support. So that's really telling us something on a direction that these new 4000 slash 5000 series CPUs, the direction that they're headed in. Very interesting times. It really is. So it really is important that you pay attention to the RAM for your motherboard, and if when you're looking to upgrade your CPU down the road, the max rated speed that for that CPU for that particular CPU you had in mind. In this case, we're going with the G-Skill Ripjaws V series, 16 gigabytes. I highly recommend you go with 16 gigabytes. You could go with 8. This is like a budget build. Like you could go with 8, save 20, $30, but if the target is under 5 and you have room to keep this there, don't keep going low. Like memory is something it's good to have now. 16 gigabytes is going to help. I mean, think about it. You have Windows is going to take up 2 to 4 2 to 4 gigabytes of reserve RAM, right? And anything else you may have running in the background, MSI Afterburner, Discord, things like that. And then depending on the game, I've seen Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1080p take up to like 8 gigabytes of RAM system memory. So, and most games require at least 4 gigabytes of RAM. And so think about it. If you're going within a single 8 gigabyte single channel kit, you're not going to have the full 8 available to play your game. You're really only going to have about 5 or 6, with maybe a few hundred megabytes to spare. So it's good to go with 16, so you have that flexibility to run other programs or just to have an overall snappy system. And down the road, if you wanted to upgrade, remember our motherboard supports up to 64 gigabytes of RAM. So if you want it, and it has support for it has 4 DIMMs. So you could down the road buy another 16 gigabyte kit of memory and go up to 32 gigabytes. But again, that's something we're gonna talk about. We're gonna talk about that down a little further down in this live stream. But yeah, you could always add another 16 gigabyte kit to your system when you upgrade, right? But that's our memory. Let's see where we are now. $311. Not bad, right? We haven't really broke 400, and we're down. Let me switch back. We're down to about our last 4 parts, and we haven't broke $400 yet. I mean, this is awesome. If you're joining in on us, or if you're joining in on, yeah, if you're joining in on us, if you're joining in on this live stream, tell us where you're watching from. Tell us what's the weather where you're currently located, and how is your weekend going on this beautiful Saturday afternoon. I'm over here in Elkton, Maryland, and it is bright and sunny. I see Just Samson just jumped into the chat. What's up, brother? It's good to see you as always. Yeah, what's up, man? We're talking $500 gaming PCs, or we're configuring a $500 gaming PC, right? And we're up to we've got our three main pieces. So if we were building this system, or if you were building this system, anybody, if you were building this system, you got your CPU, your motherboard, RAM. When I'm building, those are the first three parts I touch, right? Obviously, motherboard, CPU installed in the motherboard socket, and then I drop the RAM in. We have our three core parts of this system, all that's well on their way of delivering a solid 1080p experience. All right. The next piece, and that is a Ryzen 5 3400G. I'm sorry if you don't know, it's 4 cores, 8 threads, has SMT. Just Sam says he's watching from Cali. Yep, I remember you told us before. Going shooting later. That's awesome. Then hitting the pool. Man, that sounds like a great way to spend your Saturday. A great way to spend your Saturday. That's awesome, man. Yeah, we got. I think we got California weather right here. It's pretty bright. It's pretty bright out. But that's awesome, man. So yeah, I tell you what. Let's jump into not arguably the next important, but I just want to get it out the way now. We talk about it so much, but this motherboard does have support for an M.2 interface, an M.2 SSD. But they are a little pricey, or more pricier than going with the standard SSD. If that's something you want to pull the trigger on in the checkout cart, or say you can, you maybe got a little bit of extra overtime, or you picked up some more money on your side hustle, and now you have more money to invest in your system. Because again, the way I see it with gaming PCs is it's all about how much money you want to invest in your experience. If you want the best possible experience, then you're somewhere over 1K, and that's fine. If you can only afford, say in this case, a $500 system, that is going to meet your expectations, and that's okay too. It's all about jumping in and starting with what you can afford and knowing the right parts to buy. So if you can't afford an SSD, if that NVMe M.2 SSD, if that's going to put you over your budget, say if no matter what you can only spend $500, like you got $500 today, and you want to get all your part, you want all your stuff to come in. If you were watching on last week's live stream, you know that while you're waiting for your parts to come in, you're doing your research on your parts, saving your PC part picker list, which I'll show you how to do in a second. Not a second, but you know what I mean. But saving your part list and researching your parts individually is something you can do while you're waiting for them to come in the mail. But for our case, we're going to go with a standard SSD. As you can see, it's $57 and an NVMe M.2. What this one? I tell you what, let's go with this M.2 because I mean it's only $2 more. It's $3 more. And again, we talked about with RAM. If you have headroom and you're not over your budget, you want to put those extra monies in places that's going to really make a difference. It's going to make a significant impact. That's not, say, putting the money into a better looking case. That's subjective, right? Better might not mean um, it's aerodynamic. Its aerodynamics are going to promote good airflow through your parts. But switching from a standard SSD to say an M.2 will give you even faster boot time, faster system responsiveness, and in games, it doesn't give you more FPS, but one thing it does help with, and that's loading screens and loading times and things of that nature. So, if you're like me, I play a lot of role-playing games. I play a lot of open world games, and there's usually a lot of scenes transition. Rather, you're going into say a cave or you're going into a castle or something to that extent. I mean, on all the games I play, I have them installed on M.2s, and it's just fast. It's so much faster. It makes the difference. Just an SSD, period. Going with a hard drive is okay, right? And as you can see, you can save 20 bucks, but with that 20 bucks, in my opinion, it is worth it going with either an M.2 or even just a standard, which this is 1 terabyte, that's why it costs more, or going with just a standard SSD. But because this Western Digital Blue M.2 is $60, and the standard SSD is literally like a dollar some change less, we have the extra headroom to go with the M.2. and or well, not that size though. That was 1 terabyte. Not that size. Let's see if I can find it here. Oh dear, we lost it. Okay, let's go back up. Go back up. That's the standard one. And all right, here we go. Western Digital, $59, and it tells me it's compatible. Why is it not compatible? Oh, we have two. And that's probably because there's only one to support the 2280 size. So as you can see there, yep, sure enough, I was correct. We that incompatibility era has now gone away, and that puts us at 371. 371. Switch back here. 371, and we're down to the last two parts, right? We're down to the last two parts to this system. We haven't broke $500. We still have headroom left for other things that you may want to add to this build. Hint, hint, graphics card. Do you need one? Maybe not off the bat. Like the Ryzen 5 3400G can game at 1080p. Okay, it can game at 1080p. I don't have one in the lab. I do want to do a build with it so I can show you guys and girls hands on how well this CPU can perform. Okay, but if you want the receipts, they're all over the internet. The performance is out there. I can vouch for it though. It is a capable 1080p CPU or just an APU in general. It's a great CPU. It's going to deliver a great experience at 1080p. So if you're still at 720p or if you're rocking an older graphics card and you're ready to make the leap, consider this system here. Consider this system here, especially if you don't have a lot of funds and you want a system that you're going to be able to upgrade down the road. I'm telling you, stick with us. This system could be what you're looking for. The AMD really stepped their game up with their APUs this generation. I will say. I will say. Q says maybe a secondhand 1060. Absolutely. I mean, especially if you're getting a 6 gigabyte 1060. I'm gonna say this. I'm going to predict this, right? I'm going to predict this. The used market is going to be flooded with 10 series Pascal cards. The 1060 6 gigabytes still a very capable card, and I'm going to talk about this and later on down the live stream perhaps, but on most motherboards, if I'm not mistaken, you can disable the onboard graphics. That way there aren't any communication issues between the CPU and the graphics card, your dedicated graphics card. But you can disable the Vega 11 graphics and just run all your graphics off of the graphics card. But a secondhand 1060, um, I mean, especially if they can drop like under $150, like 130, 150. Man, if you can snag a used 1060 somewhere within that price range, you're sitting pretty good. Or like I was talking to a member in our audience, a regular member here in our audience about the 980 Ti, which also has 6 gigabytes of VRAM. It'd also be a good pair with this system, and you can game at 1440p on a 980. Excuse me, on a 980 Ti. But we're going with 500 gigabyte SSD. But yeah, Q, I'm sorry, I do agree. Yeah, a secondhand 1060, definitely. I want to get my hands on one, but they're a little hard to find. And when I do find one, a little past what I'm willing to pay for it. Q says I have an i5 7500 and 1050 Ti right now. It plays fine. Yeah, the 1050 Ti, I had one here in the lab, and I regret getting rid of it before I did more tests on it because it was a card that surprised me, that wowed me very early on when it launched. And I had an MSI 1050 Ti, and my kids used it with, ironically, the same CPU that you use, Q, an i5 7500, and I upgraded them to a better graphics card. But the 1050 Ti has a lot of performance, and I've been seeing them for under $100. If you can snag one for that price, go for it. It's a great 1080p card. Um, back to our system here. 500 gigabytes is what I'd recommend starting off, depending on how many games you play, the type of games you play. Call of Duty Warzone, everybody knows. Um, it's getting larger and larger on PC anyway. I believe now. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Either on the replay or here on the chat. I believe it's over 100 gigabytes already now. Last the reports I saw was over 100 gigabytes. That's a big download. Fortnite is large too, but if you're a casual gamer, 500 gigabytes may or may not be enough, but again, that's something you can always save up, add a little bit more down the road. Say get a 1 terabyte hard drive, a mechanical hard drive, which mechanical hard drives I recommend, say if you want long-term redundant storage to play games you don't play as much. Say if it's a game you already beat, but you really don't want to install it, or it's not a game you play as much, but you don't have fast internet where you are, so you don't want to like uninstall and just re-download on the whim. You want to leave it on there. It's good to install those games on your 1 terabyte hard drive. You could just casually throw them in. There's nothing wrong with a hard drive, especially early on in their life cycle. But as they get old, they do start making grinding noises, and that's just an early sign that your hard drive is beginning to fail. Because in a mechanical drive, as the name implies, there are um, tiny parts moving around inside of there, and they just wear over time. So that's just something to consider. But if you don't think 500 gigabytes is enough, excuse me, based on the games you play, you can either up your budget. We'll see at the end where we stand and if we have enough to go from maybe say a 500 gigabyte M.2 with another 500 gigabyte SSD um, to give us more storage to play more games. But we'll see where we're at because starting off 500 gigabytes could be more than enough for about 2 or 3 games. Really depends on what they are. And Q says he's had or Q says they've had their 1050 Ti since they came out. That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I had not the first batch, but I had one close to after they launched. And again, I really regret getting rid of it. Q says we'll be able to put together a ITX system in this stream maybe after this build. We'll see. I'm already past our our hour limit, but if we can change the motherboard to um, an ITX form factor, then yeah, yeah. Matter of fact, we're going to try to strive for that. That is on Ryzen and AM4. Do you have a tell us Q if you have a price point for a motherboard you'd want to see it stay at as we round out this build, or if about the same as here with this MSI X470. And speaking of form factor, we're going to jump right. Let's go with case because we know we know we're at 159 watts. We're sitting good on our power supply unit or what we're going to need as far as a PSU. Um, and we're also sitting good at price, $371. We're about to have a little over $100 headroom to get our power supply and our case. The one downside to this system, I will say, is the type of case won't be as robust as something say as the H510 NZXT or Lianli Dynamic 11. Even this Fantex Eclipse P300. Originally, the case I had in mind for this system was somewhere between $39 and $40. This Fantex Eclipse P300 is a little over that. I think it may put me over the budget. It isn't, again, it isn't the case I had in mind before. It was a DIY. It's a DIY PC case, and it's a fine case. It does have RGB if that's something you'd be interested in. I'm sorry, I didn't, so you guys can see the screen. Um, but the DIY PC does have RGB, right? It had a mesh filter in the front, and it was coming in at a relatively low price. But with a case, you if you really don't care for the fancy lights and things, then don't pay extra for them, right? You can always add them in down the road, say like RGB fans or something to that extent. Like you can really upgrade your system. And this Cougar, we're gonna go with this Cougar MX 330G. And if I'm not mistaken, this case here, a friend of mine has this case, uses this case. And other than the price point, which is pretty decent to start out with, right? We're under $50. It's only about $5 to $6 more than what I picked out the first time. But excuse me, here a couple of things I like about it is for one, it does have a side panel, so you can see the inside of your case. Me personally, I like looking at the everything I've picked out, and I am a fan of RGB, although I'm a fan of static. color RGB, but I do like looking inside my case and just, just looking at all the parts in their glory and just checking out the aesthetic. I think it's great. This case also has a front mesh, so in theory, it does have better support for airflow, which is important in my opinion, getting airflow in through the front of the case. Okay, and if I'm not, let me go to the top, and the same thing here with the top. If you wanted to put, exhaust fans at the top, or um, fans to bring in cool air, intake fans at the top to bring down on your CPU cooler if you're going with an air cooler. Q says maybe around 150 for the Mobo. Okay, that's going to be a little tight if we're staying under $500. Going, you would have to stick with the 3400G. Excuse me, if you wanted to stay under $500, because I mean, from my research, ITX motherboards cost slightly more just for the convenience of space and this small form factor you get. Small form factor builds are awesome. I do want to do one live and in person, but for our case, we are going to go with this Cougar mid tower case. It's a mid tower case, so you won't have to really worry about space. Should have USB 3.2 Gen 1 headers. Yes, 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 yes. Why is that important? Well, our motherboard has USB 3.2 Gen 1 headers. So we want to make sure our excuse me, you want to make sure you get a case that has these headers, and that way you're taking advantage of those faster, serial read and writes, right? That's for your peripherals, your mic, your keyboard, your mouse, camera, all those things. Q says, I've been saving up for a long time so I can go higher, but I am not planning on overclocking or streaming. Okay, okay. Do you Will you plan on having a dedicated graphics card or something similar to like the 3400G? It's also important to note that this case, if you didn't want to go with an ATX case, it does support micro ATX and mini ATX, mini ITX. The build that the build that Q is referring to, I believe, is a mini ITX. And he says, I plan on reusing my 1050 Ti. Is that a smart move? Sure. And still say upgrade down the road? Absolutely. If your 1050 Ti is playing all the games that you enjoy, and you want to and you want to up your CPU, which would be a great upgrade from a 7500, absolutely. Absolutely. And on this AM4 platform, you would have better upgrade room, especially if you're in the range of $150 mini ITX motherboard, then that positions you to take advantage of better VRMs. Excuse me, if you do want to overclock in the future, I mean, you have a wide range of CPUs to choose from on this platform. But for this case, we're going to go with the Cougar. We're going to go with this Cougar MX case. We're going to add it. All right. So we have our case. Case is out the way. Let's see where we're at. We're at 422. So we obviously we have headroom for the power supply unit, right? And let's do a quick recap before our final part for this system in its current form. We have our AMD Ryzen 5 3400G Zen 2 Plus CPU architecture, 4 cores, 8 threads, base clock frequency of 3.7 gigahertz, max turbo of up to 4 gigahertz and better, 65-watt TDP, which is really, really good. This is why it's attributed to our low estimated wattage here. And I would imagine even when it's under a heavy CPU load, it probably tops out somewhere between 75 to 95 watts at best, especially if you're not touching the voltage. And then we have our MSI X470 chipset Gaming Plus. This motherboard is going to allow you to update the microcode for further compatibility with other Ryzen CPUs. So that's Zen 2 and even Zen 3 CPUs, upcoming new Zen 3 CPUs. 16 gigabytes of G-Skill Ripjaws V-Series RAM, rated at 3200 megahertz and CL16. This is going to give us a fast, responsive system. It's going to help with that. Again, we're on the Ryzen platform. Memory speed is so important. This is from my findings and my research from what I've concluded. Memory speeds are so important. Again, I did the unlock your DDR4 and enable XP video, and again, that's just to more so really convey the message of why you want to make sure you're enabling your XMP, not overclocking your RAM and just going for max spec. Just you just want to make sure you're not at 2133 megahertz. Is so important. Then for storage, we have a Western Digital Blue 500 gigabyte M.2, right, for our games. And a bonus tip, if you haven't heard me mention this before in any other live streams or any other VODs, video on demands, install your OS or Windows or whatever your OS is. You want to install it on the SSD almost always, like almost always, unless you're building a system that is under $300, which we're going to do too. We're going to go even lower here on a live stream, but if you're going for a system that's $400 and you really, really, really need to skim and you need to go with a mechanical drive, I mean that's fine. But even then, try to find ways or find the extra capital to have a two-part storage system. Which best practice is go with the highest single solution that you possibly can. But if money is really tight, maybe go with a 120 gigabyte SSD, and and that way you can just install Windows on that SSD. Maybe one other game that you really play. Nothing like Fortnite or Call of Duty Warzone because they're just also large in file size. But excuse me, we have our case, which is a Cougar MX 330 ATX mid tower case. Side panel, front mesh for cool air in the front. I didn't really talk on the aesthetic, but this aesthetic really goes, this gunmetal black really goes with our motherboard. I want to say it is tempered glass. Awesome. So yeah, it's so you don't have to worry about the weight a great deal. Has decent ratings. I always say read up on reviews, search the web, browse right here on YouTube. Pretty sure this case has been reviewed in the past by some of the larger other tech tubers. But if you want to get a good visual on the case, you can always search up on the web for it. Again, that's good practice to do that in between while you're waiting for all your parts to come in. Just familiarize yourself with the parts. That's something we talked about on last weekend's live stream. Which, if you're new here to the channel, I welcome you to subscribe. We do go live every Saturday with times varying to try to find a good window that's convenient and or just convenient for our audience. But I do welcome you to subscribe and be on the lookout for those live team. I do try to schedule them out at least 3 to 4 days prior. But this case goes well with our motherboard, with our MSI X470 motherboard. As you can see, it has that same kind of black aesthetic that the case has, and it'll blend well, and you'll be able to see this inside the case, which is awesome, which is really awesome. Plus the cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 3400, the Wraith Stealth. It's a black, it's a black cooler aesthetic, no RGB. So this is like a monochromatic build almost, if you will. And this would look really dope. Like this would look really hot, especially with the RAM too itself has this like black with a hint of red, G Skills branding right here on the sticker. Which some people, I've seen the stories, I've seen the memory. Some people take the coolers off the DIMMs, off the memory DIMMs. I wouldn't recommend. The heat spreader, I'm sorry, not the cooler, but the heat spreader off the memory, or even just take the sticker off. Whatever you may have, this RAM, excuse me, will go as aesthetic wise really well with these other parts, with our case, right, with our motherboard, our cooler, and then last but not least, the last part before we try to jump in and go in and reconfigure this into a mini ITX build is our power supply. And I just want to jump back to see where we are with estimated wattage. 159 watts. Wow. Wow. This is low. This is low for us having all our core parts. Okay, let me switch back here. That is low, 159 watts. That's a really low estimated system power draw. But again, that is an estimate, and that is not indicative of the program you may be running, and if if those parts are at max load or not. Excuse me. So it's important to note that on top of wanting to compensate for that, You also want to make sure you're leaving yourself a decent amount of headroom for the future parts we want to upgrade. That was something I was going to talk about a little bit down the live stream, but we're nearly there. So I'm just going to bring it up now. Let me jump back here. We're at 159 watts. We want to upgrade a GPU down the road. We want to account for that extra wattage. And I believe we said we had about what 67 we got about 80 $90 to spend to pick a power supply that is going to be good enough now and also going to be good enough in the future. It's very important. Very important. So well, a brand that I recommend almost indefinitely going with either Corsair. Corsair makes really good Corsair makes really good PSUs with their RMX series, EVGA2 with their BR series, and Thermaltake makes really good, and Cooling Master. I mean, they make really good power supplies and really plan and research before you buy, right? If you're on PC Part Picker and you know what your wattage is and you're not familiar with, say, EVGA, if you never bought parts from EVGA or Corsair, do a little bit of research on them. Don't just take my word for it, please. Do more research on these brands before you pull the trigger. I mean, this is your money, and at the end of the day, it's important to you. You worked hard for it, and you want to make sure you're getting the most out of it, and you want to make sure you're getting parts that are going to last. But I can honestly say I stand by Corsair and EVGA power supplies. It's really, if I can take all the power supplies I have, let me switch back. If I can take all the power supplies I have right now in the lab, in the studio, all but one is a non EVGA or Corsair power supply. That's real talk. Like, and that is in you, trivia. If you're here on the live stream, you probably wouldn't know, but I did talk about the video that I'm referring to earlier in the live stream, and that is in the Wonder Woman rig video build we did, or the computer that my wife uses for her school, and she's an early ed educator. She's an early ed professional, and she goes to school, and we built that system for her to do casual gaming. It has a Ryzen 5 1600X and a GTX 750 Ti and 16 gigabytes of RAM, but it also has a 500 watt Rose Hill power supply unit that I picked up off the used market, I believe for like 20 bucks. And it's extremely quiet, reliable. I have no complaints with it. I did do research though on that power supply before I bought it, and I came across nothing but good stuff. I was confident in the buy, especially with buying secondhand. Just an extra tip: if you're buying secondhand, definitely do the research on the parts. Check because that seller might be selling it because it has some common issues and they're just trying to pawn that off on you. So it is good to do your homework or do your research as you buy your parts. So jumping back, we're gonna go with an EVGA power supply, and I like to stay at least 500 watts. Our power draw significantly lower, yeah, at 159 watts. But again, if we want to make sure we have ample headroom to run a higher rated watt CPU, right? Like a higher core CPU, let's say down the road you grow tired of the system, you're like, you know what, I'm tired of just gaming. I also want to stream. I want to stream in game. I want to stream game and also edit my videos when I'm done and upload them to my YouTube channel. You might say, you know what, I definitely need more cores. I need a better CPU, or I need to add a dedicated graphics card to help with the encoding process or to help ease the burden of streaming and stream on your graphics card. Some people recommend streaming on the graphics card. I normally stream on the CPU. I think this really depends on the resolution, the game you're playing, among other things. But whatever works for you in terms of delivering the best possible viewer experience for your audience, I'd say go for in the terms of streaming from your CPU or versus streaming from your GPU, go for what presents the best experience for your audience. Okay, best experience for the audience. That's important. And that's one of the things I strive for the most, creating content and structuring our live stream events. It's creating the best possible experience for the audience. But we're going to go with the BQ EVGA 500 watt, 80 plus bronze certified power supply. So that means at max we should have anywhere between 450, 500 watts available, somewhere between there, 400 to 450 watts available at top system load, it is semi-modular. What that means is some parts, some cords, some wires can be uh, modular and some can't be, meaning you can remove them if you don't plan on using them or if you have no use for them, and then some you can't. A fully modular power supply is what the name implies, is that it's fully modular. You can either replace the sleeves, replace the cables altogether, or say in this case, since we're now going with a graphics card right now, anyway, you wouldn't need to use the PCIe cord. So you would just tuck that somewhere in the case, out of sight, out of mind. Or if you never had any plans on upgrading to a graphics card, you could go with a power supply, a much lower power supply unit, which would be really odd because most gamers, especially on the PC, most gamers they want to upgrade their system. They want to level up their experience. Q says, I bought lots of no-name PSUs and I'm currently using a Zigmatech PSU that came with the case. Best one I had yet. Yeah, I mean, sometimes no-name PSUs, at least from my understanding from watching, larger tech tubers like Brian over at Tech Yes City, um, some of those no-name power supply units, I mean, they hold up. They hold up with the brand. Partially, what you're paying for with these bigger brands is you're paying for the name, like you're paying for the reliability. But like you said, Q, some of those no-name power supply units can still get the job done, especially if your system, isn't a high wattage system like the one we're building here. But and tell me, I could be correct or I could be wrong, but the 1050 Ti I had anyway, the MSI one didn't require any power from any PCIe power. It got its power from the PCIe lane on the motherboard. So even then, I didn't really need a beefy power supply at the time either. And I believe I was at 500 watts. It was like 450 or 500 watt power supply unit. But one thing to point out is you want to know, speaking of PCIe connectors, you want to know what kind of PCI connectors it has, right? Because for one, you want to make sure you can get a graphics card that's going to have the right pin configuration, right? Most graphics cards is 6 pin or 8 pin, something to that extent. So you want to make sure you're future proofing yourself or knowing what graphics card you may want to get down the road. Is it a 6 pin, or you want to get a graphics card that doesn't require, any power from the power supply? So it just really depends on, what your future outlook may look like or what your future outlook may be, right? But this power supply unit is more than enough for this system, 500 watts. And any mid-level like a 1060 graphics card you may want to add. And let's be real, I mean, switching out your power supply unit, believe it or not, it's not that hard. In my opinion, it's not that hard. If you did say if your circumstances may change, let's say you get an increase in finances, right? Let's say you get a better paying job or you get a bonus, you get a raise, you made extra more money. You say, you know what? No, I want to go high end. I want to get like a 30 RTX 3070 or a 3080, something to that extent. Just upgrade your power supply unit. The used market is your best friend. There are people out there that would pick up your secondhand parts. It's not a popular opinion, but it's what I recommend. It's okay to sell your parts, recoup some of the cost that you may endure. If you paid 64 and you got a couple months, 6 months out of this power supply unit, and you want to upgrade to say something that can accommodate a beefier GPU or a beefier CPU, and you want to go over like 850 watts or even 650 watts is a comfortable position to be. That extra $100 could be offset, and you can maybe put out of pocket maybe $44, $50 for the upgrade, and just do that slowly, slowly in pieces. It's one of the things again I enjoy about PC gaming is the ability and the choice to slowly upgrade parts as I see fit, or based off of have I outgrown this part. With me, my 1050 Ti, I had just outgrown it very early on. So, but yeah, I mean, Q says, I think mine consumes around 75 watts. Most of the time, my PSU fans don't even start spinning. That's great. It helps. probably promote a quiet atmosphere. I don't know if you most gamers play with headsets. I don't. And believe it or not, I consider myself a super casual gamer. Like I don't play competitive multiplayer games. And when I do, I'm playing with like personal friends, and it's like casually playing Fortnite or casually playing Warzone. I play for fun. I don't play for stats. But most of the games I play are SP games, and I don't play with a headset, so I kind of hear everything. But I mean that's that's great. That's great. Yeah, the 1050 Ti doesn't have a high TDP. So, and you can might even still overclock it because I was able to still overclock the one I had like plus 100 on the core and plus 100 on the memory. But yeah, I mean that's our power supply, 500 watts. And look at that, $492. We're under the $500 mark. Um, Q says, "Yeah, me too. No hardcore gaming, right? You're on your way to college, so your studies will most likely take precedence over your gamings. But my suggestion, because what I do is I try to schedule my gaming sessions like like a job. Like I say, I give myself 8 hours a week to game, and I'll delegate those 8 to 10 hours. It's not a lot. Like I did a poll very early on the community tab, and as far as like how many hours you spend a week gaming, and I was embarrassed to even vote myself. I'm somewhere between like the 8 to 10 range a week. I do work full time. I am not a full time creator, not yet. At our current growth, I hope to start my full time YouTube journey at somewhere at about 10,000 subscribers. We got a long way to go, though, community. We got a long way to go. So shameless plug here, but if you haven't already yet, I please welcome you. Hopefully this live stream or this replay is the day I earn your subscription, and you're just one more voice on our way to 10,000 voices strong. But I'm not a full-time YouTuber, so my time is very uh has to be very committed to the craft as far as learning and just getting better and just expanding my knowledge base on the various different computer parts because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to learn. But this is our system. We're under $492. And before we jump into the final piece and switch over to try to go into a mini ITX build, I did want to say with Windows, here's the thing with Windows, right? If you get your system, people say, "Well, what am I supposed to do about Windows?" You can get a legit Microsoft Windows key from Microsoft. It comes with the USB drive with the installer program already on it. You just plug it in. The Windows key is there. I use it with the Threadripper system we built. And if you haven't watched the Threadripper series, if I remember, I'll try to throw a link up to the card here. But it's most definitely down in the description box below. So check that out in the basement after this live stream. But I did use it for the Threadripper build. And it did run a pretty penny, right? I did it as an experiment. It was $109 for this Windows key. And if you want the good, better, best route, that is likely the best way to go, but you don't have to go that route. For starters, you can create your own USB Windows installer USB by formatting at least a 16 gigabyte USB to a FAT32 format and download the program right from Microsoft's website. Download the program onto the USB, follow the prompt, and you'll be good to go. Excuse me. On top of that, a you wouldn't even need a Windows key. And on that side note, Q says I only have time on the weekends. Used to clean pools before Corona, but now I play 10 and 15 hours a week. Yeah, the same way. I normally try to dedicate most of my time between gaming is usually last on the list is getting the content ready for say a live stream or for a VOD. But yeah, that's usually where my time was gaming on the weekends too. But with the live streams now, it's kind of cannibalized that, which is okay. I normally try to game after responding to comments and just like detox from the hustle and bustle of being online and just communicating with different people. But yeah, 10 to 15 hours. I tell you what, everybody else down in the chat, tell us down in the comment sections how how many hours do you spend a week gaming? Quick poll. Tell us down in the comment sections. I'm going to drop mine as well. I'm going to say a firm 8 to 10 hours a week. And here recently, that's mostly a cross between Madden because I am a football fan. Atlanta Falcons. I do like the Atlanta Falcons. I know I do not want to talk about the Super Bowl. I don't even want to talk. I know I don't even want to talk about anything about Atlanta Falcons. But they are my franchise. Them in Dallas. But here with Madden out, I've been playing a lot of Madden, and my choice of single player adventure games because I like being immersed in games. I like becoming a character. But I'm playing. I'm trying to get caught up on the Assassin's Creed games because I have the UPlay Plus subscription for benchmarking games and just for personal play. But I'm playing Assassin's Creed Origins on top of slowly trying to grind out into Witcher 3, and my so Kim says about 4 hours a week. Yeah, so that's lower than mine. But Chris says Chris S. Welcome to the chat. Says my current system is 8700K, cooled by 360 millimeter Corsair AIO on a Z390 Prime Asus motherboard with 32 gigabytes of G-Skill RAM at 3200 megahertz, 750 watt power supply, EVGA power supply, and an RTX 2080 Gaming X Trio. That's a that's very similar to my setup. Ironically, Chris, um, like very similar. Other than I don't have a 360 millimeter AIO. I wanted one at the time, but couldn't get my hands on one when I was building this Coffee Lake system. And the RTX 2080 Gaming X Trio. I have that graphics card. I love the RGB and I love the lighting that MSI introduced on that card. Wow. This is the reason why I have yet to put in my EVGA RTX 2080 Ti. I game at 3440 by 1440p. The 2080 is more than enough for the games I play, especially most of the time I'm playing Fallout 76, and at that resolution, the refresh rate is locked to 50 no more than 50 hertz. So the 2080 is more than enough for the games I played. I really like the aesthetic on the card. It's a really good looking card. Q says, "Oh, and awesome system specs, by the way, Chris. I too am on 8700K, and I've been talking with friends in the community. I'm probably gonna go upgrade to a secondhand 9900K. Keep my Z390 um, Maximus Hero board, and just say upgrade to like a 9900K for now because the 10 900K is still very much expensive, and 8 cores is more than enough for my workload now until I crop up into say 4K video, and that might not come until earlier in the year. But awesome system. Q says A me too. Yeah, man, that's A me too. What do you say? Oh, I guess to gaming. And oh, my man Demetrius is in the house. What's up, D? He says 2 to 12. It depends on how busy I am during that week and the game I'm playing. That is true. Like that is true because when I play an RPG, I hate to sit down and I can't finish. Like that really bums me out. Like I hate to like cap my time. But you're right. It really depends on the game. Congrats on the new car too, bro. That thing is really dope. It's really nice. Q says I even have a pair of Vapor Jet 3.0s. Awesome. Looking. Chris says he's looking to upgrade to a 3080. Just waiting on other variants after AMD releases their cards. He says, "Thanks, man. You're welcome, Chris." Yeah, we talked about the RTX 3080. I know I did a vlog on it that might seem pessimistic, but in no way, shape, or form was I rooting for the RTX 3080 to fail. I would have bought one at launch if I could have got my hands on one. Like, and I paid MSRP. Like, I'm not paying any more than what the card what Nvidia's even selling it for. Like, why would I pay more for some scalper who wants to charge more? But I too would have upgraded for one just for general testing here in the lab because um, I really do think AM or Nvidia is going to release a 3080 Ti, and that would be the card I would personally want to upgrade from, say, from having a 2080 Ti. And even then, I don't know if I really feel the effects unless I switch to 4K gaming, which we did do a video on a 4K monitor I picked up. It's down. We're using it as the primary monitor on a test bed. And D says, "Thanks, bro. Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. And again, if you're out there in the wild, tell us in the chat how many hours you spend a week, or if you want to share your stats, if you want to share your specs with us, by all means, please do. Um, all budgets are welcome here, right? All budgets are welcome here. Speaking of budgets, we hit our $492 mark. We were talking about installing Windows 10. You have some options. You have some options. Again, get a 16 gigabyte USB thumb drive, format it to a 32 fat format, and download the Microsoft Windows installation, Windows 10 installation tool directly from Microsoft. It's free. And guess what? You don't even need a Windows 10 key. No, you don't need a Windows 10 key to install Windows 10. If you want to do it from scratch, you do those things I just said. Get a USB drive, format it to a FAT32. That's easy to do within Windows, and download Microsoft's Windows 10 installation tool. When you go to install Windows for the first time, and you get to the part where it says, you know, insert your Windows key, down at the bottom, if you've never done it before, but down at the bottom of the Windows 10 installation tool or portal, there's a section that says I do not have a Windows key yet. You just click on that and you continue right on with the installation process. Now, what does happen, the downside to that is you are left with this hideous activate Windows 10 watermark that I should do my head like a bobblehead, but you're left with this hideous please activate Windows 10 watermark down at the bottom right hand corner of your screen. You also miss out on um, some customizable options like changing your desktop if that's important, which it is important in my opinion. Changing your desktop is important. It's a part of making part of the computer's personality reflective on you. Like I normally change my desktop to whatever the game I'm playing at the moment, which it's not the desktop now, which is a long story. But normally I try to change it, which was an Assassin's Creed Origins desktop, just because anytime I sit down, if I want to get inspired to play or want to get inspired to game, whatever inspires you. If you're a musician, if you're a education, if you're a teacher, a professional, which I believe me chant 123 Demetrius is. He teaches at a local college here in a neighboring state, the state that I essentially grew up in. But if your general use falls under anywhere near that criteria, right? I mean, you don't necessarily need those functions, but whatever inspires you, you may want to consider not having your desktop, not being able to change your wallpaper. Q says I buy gray market keys in Turkey. Original copy of Windows 10 is around 110 USD. Thanks for sharing that with us, Q. And that leading to the second part of the Windows of downloading Windows 10 I was going to bring up, and that is you can buy gray market keys or keys off key sites like SCD Keys and CDKeys.com. eBay. I am an affiliate. I am an eBay affiliate and I am an SD key affiliate. I use those keys for my systems, and I have not had one issue aside from the one time I did use a key from eBay for a client bill here locally, and I was unable to use the key. But in the installation tool, there is a process where you can call and speak to a Windows representative, and they will physically activate it for you, no questions asked. They cannot ask you where you got the Windows key from. All they can do is ask you to read it back to them, and they will tell you on the phone how to manually activate your Windows 10 key. And other than that, I have not had any issues with getting keys from key sites. And what kind of turns people off from doing that is the cost. They say, well, like Q said, original copy of Windows 10 is about 110 USD or 110 in Turkey currency. Well, that's the same thing here in the States. It's about the same. It's about 109 to $110 for an original copy of Windows 10. But if you're getting it from a key site, you could be paying anywhere from between like 14 to $20. Yes, like absolutely. You could pay somewhere between four. Let's see here. Let me jump over, and then I promised we were going to, if we had time, which we're going to do it. But let me jump over to, let's go to eBay, and I'll show you here in a second. Say you're on eBay. We're going to Windows 10 Pro Key. So a little pricey, but as you can see here, $400 or $400. Gosh, I still can't find my words. But $4 for a Windows 10 Pro Key. 504 sold, 506 sold. This seller has a reputation, instant delivery, lifetime original key support, all the green check marks. The same thing applies on like SCD keys or CD keys. depending on where you are and who you're buying it from, you can save money on getting a gray market key or a secondhand key or a secondhand Windows key, right? These are all really high. So I wouldn't go. eBay was maybe a bad example, but just to point out here that you can search and you can find some sellers who this is all they do, this is all they sell are just Windows 10 keys. They get them from old defunct systems or Windows 10 keys that aren't being used anymore. So that's just an option, but you don't have to necessarily dole out the money to buy a Windows 10 key. If you say you want an original copy of a Windows 10 key, you don't want to go the gray area. Well, still download Windows 10. Don't wait to say need the extra $100+ for a copy of Windows 10. Just don't. Still, still use the Windows 10 installer, the free version, and buy a key site down the road. Heck, you can even buy an original key down the road and just input it from there, right? And if you do run into any activation issues, you can always uninstall Windows and reinstall it fresh. You can do it that way. So, because if you did, obviously, if we bought it for 15, if you bought it for $100, that would put us over our budget, easy. Like about $600, you might as well say, which is still, I mean, that's console like right there, with more room to upgrade than a console. Sorry, let me go back to the screen. $492. Yeah, if we added $100 Windows 10 key, that put us over our budget. It put us in the realm of console prices, but this system better than a console. Consoles have purpose. PCs have uh, personality, if you will. You can make them yours. You can slowly upgrade it. Everybody is going to have the same looking PS5. Now, everybody, for the most part, is going to have the same Xbox looking Series X. But when it comes down to building a personal computer, they're all not going to look the same. Even if you're using the same case, the configuration may be different. You may have customs sleeves, cable sleeves. You may have a water cooler. Like Chris mentioned, he had a 360 millimeter water cooler. Which I'm curious, Chris, if you're still around, tell us what's the max overclock you got on your 8700K on that 360 millimeter AIO. My 8700K is on a Corsair V2 AIO, and I can do 5.1. I could do 5.2. I'm not comfortable at the temperatures I get though in my testing at 5.2, but comfortably it can do 5 no problem, somewhere about 1.42 voltage, 1.43 voltage. Um, and I have kind of flirted with the idea of going past there, but at that time, my benchmarks start to creep into temperature territories I'm not comfortable with. They're within spec, but with my overclocks, even if I'm just like messing around, I don't like going past 95 degrees C. And at 5.2 gigahertz, the voltage required, it's very much pushing past there. But yeah, tell me what kind of overclocks you get on your 8700K. Excuse me. And if you're just joining our live stream, we went over our $500 gaming PC, which the central part to us hitting that mark is a Ryzen 5 3400G, 4-core 8-thread AMD Ryzen Zen Plus CPU. Now, Q in the chat wanted us to convert this system to mini ITX. Same CPU, same RAM. Okay, all the parts are going to stay the same for the most part, but the motherboard. And maybe we'll change. Sorry if you guys can hear my phone, but maybe we'll change the case to better, to a mini ITX case, small form factor. But most importantly, let's start with the motherboard. I'm going to change the filter to mini ITX, right? And then close this out. So as you can see here, prices go up. Q said we wanted to stay somewhere between. Oh, I guess it helps if you guys can see the screen. I keep forgetting to do that. My bad. But Q said somewhere between $150. We want to start with for a mini ITX build. If we can, if we have the space to keep it, I'm gonna try to keep it under 500, right? We don't need a graphics card because let's say you are in the same position that Q is in. Q is upgrading their platform from they're switching from Intel, most importantly, from a Skylake, I believe it's Skylake, Kaby Lake, I'm sorry, a Kaby an i5 Kaby Lake CPU, which has 4 cores and 4 threads. It's still good for gaming. You don't have to have hyperthreading, but hyperthreading helps. But he's switching from a four core 4 thread CPU 7500 to, let's say he was upgrading to this 3400G, which is 4 cores, 8 threads. It is a significant platform switch. It is an upgrade. The i5 7500 has a max clock speed of 3600 megahertz or 3400 megahertz. You can't overclock them. They're non-K SKUs. You can't overclock them. All Ryzen CPUs you can manually overclock. They're all unlocked, what's called unlocked. So Intel K CPUs, if they have a K, that means they're unlocked. If there's no K, that means they're not unlocked. The with AMD side, it's they have the X at the end of their SKUs. For example, the Ryzen 5 1600X or the 3700X, 3950X. All that means is that those CPUs are better binned and they can go further, slightly further in terms of overclocking. But all AMD CPUs are overclockable. So you could even on this with this build, you can squeeze out even more performance. So let's shop around and Asus. I mean, I like Asus. I like Asus motherboards. I like Asus products. Period. Their motherboards, their graphics cards. One of my favorite 1080 Ti's was the Asus ROG Strix 1080 Ti. I love that shroud, but then the MSI Gaming X Trio came around, and then I fell in love with that shroud. Then I switched it up. But if we need, I'm gonna stay at the under the 150 or around there, and if we can, say to make up for, switching to a mini ITX case, we'll drop it down from there because we have other options with the A320 board or a B450 motherboard, or maybe we are going to go to B450 motherboard, right? If you wanted to go up to an X570, you can see here you're gonna pay significantly more amount of money. And this is why I was saying earlier in the stream, if you were going to go for a higher end CPU, chances are you were already looking at a higher end motherboard that's just as compatible. But in this case, we're going to stick with the B450 Asus ROG Strix. Right, so it should tell us that maybe we need a BIOS update. Yeah, see here, some B450 chipsets may need a BIOS update prior to using Picasso CPUs. That's just something to take into consideration if you're going to say, go with a mini ITX motherboard that's not a B550 and you're unsure if it's coming from the manufacturer, if it's coming from Asus with the microcode already, already installed to support Zen Plus CPUs, which is weird because you would think it would. I mean, it's the Zen Plus APU, but this mini ITX motherboard, $141. That puts us at 518. So that does put us over, and of course because we're spending more, we're spending more for the motherboard, about $41 more for the motherboard. How could we maybe try to get underneath there? Well, let's filter. Let's change our format to mini ITX Tower and see what pickings we have. So we're not likely going to be able to drop under the $50 mark. So in this circumstance, Q, or in this example, you may have to allocate yourself a little bit more to compensate for the cost of the case and going with a mini ITX motherboard. This Cooler Master Elite 110, this is a pretty cool looking, a pretty dope small factor case, and I can see the appeal of small form factor. Like I really do. This is an amazing space saver, and just wow. Going with but it's important to note that depending on what case you would go with, you do want to make sure that it does fit all other components, more specifically your GPU. You want to make sure it has the right length to fit inside the case. And you want to make sure you don't need a special power supply unit, like I talked about earlier in the live stream, where I need an SF power supply for the small form factor case I would like to build. But you can see here again, PC Part Picker gives you some valuable information. If you wanted to make sure your GPU fit and your cooler fit, on, if you were going with an aftermarket cooler, you can check the dimension sizes here, and even right here, boom, maximum video card length, 210 millimeters. So you want to make sure you're somewhere down there and below, or somewhere under that threshold. It does have front panel USB Gen 2, 3. USB 3.2 Gen 1 support, right? And I don't see a mention of needing an SFS power supply, as it doesn't come with one here. But it's just important to note that you familiarize yourself with the case, especially with building a small form factor, because there are a lot of other areas of concern that you have to make sure you're covering before you get all your parts. One of the worst things to happen is you get your parts and something's incompatible, and you can't finish your build. But let's see, this morning is still back to the BIOS chipset. So I mean we're $20 over, and not a whole lot. But if that was stopping you and this is what you wanted today, then it's just something to consider. It's $20. Either wait an extra week or few, borrow, beg, do whatever you got to do. But you can make this system a reality, very close to console-like prices. And at this point, one will argue it's smaller than a console and arguably just as powerful. The Ryzen 5 3400G, I mean, from my finest, it runs games like GTA 5, right? GTA 5, which is a CPU intensive heavy game. GTA 5 between in the high 90s at medium to high settings with anthroposcopic filtering set to 16, uh, set to about 16, high 120s in games like Battlefield 5. So in your first person shooters, high 120s there, high 100s in games like PUBG, Players Unknown Battleground, and even Counter Strike Go in the high 400s. I mean, this system is going to deliver a really good gaming experience, very similar to a console. And you could still add a GPU, rather it's in a mini ITX small form factor case or a full ATX case. You can still add a GPU down the road. A while ago, I did a video with the Ryzen 2200G. It's much older content, but very much still relevant. And I didn't test a lot of games because that build was for a client, but I did run a Unigen Heaven, and some at 1080p low settings, it was well over 60 frames per second. I mean, that CPU very much too could run Fortnite at competitive settings. But either way, this system it could be good to wait for the upcoming Zen 3 or Ryzen 4000, 5000, but to wait for in terms of going from Zen 2 or Zen Plus to see the performance gains we're going to get going from Zen Plus to Zen 3. But if you want to build a system that's capable of doing the things you want to do now and that can also do even more in the future, this could be a good starting price point for you. This $500 limit. This could be a good place for you to start. Okay. And now, with that said, I think this ride is getting ready to come to an end. I think this ride is about ready to come to an end. I want to give a shout out to everybody who's joined us here on the live today. Q, let's go over to the chat really quick in case any last minute questions were missed, or if anybody would like to leave any last minute thoughts. But shout out to Q, Chris, me champ, D, Kim, just Samson, Pleb, YT, Z Fluent. Shout out to all of you for coming out and hanging out with me during this live stream. I really do appreciate it. If you're here on the replay, I double especially appreciate you being here just as much as my live friends, because they're very long. And if you made it already to the end, tell me down, leave me a little clue or hint down in the description box, because I really do appreciate that. It really does help with the channel. Um, with that said, that'll be all for this one. Thanks for giving it a watch. Q says thank you for the ITX build. You are more than welcome. It's my pleasure. Do be on the lookout for, I'm going to go more in deep, or I'm going to go deeper into small form factor builds here very soon. Q. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you for coming out with the live stream, and best of luck to you on on your studies. But thanks for hanging out here with me on this YouTube live. I hope to catch everyone in the next one. But until then, be easy.